Right, karibu sana and good morning. It is the very last Wednesday of January 2025, tarehe ni 29th of January. My name is Freddie Ndimuli. Top trend this morning on X, Eastern DRC. It is also the big headline on the front page of the Daily Nation. DRC erupts.
Let's just get right into it. My name is Anne Odida. Thank you so much for choosing us this morning. Let's get started.
All right, so definitely news from the DRC, what's happening in Goma and Kinshasa making big headlines, and it affects us as well. Today, President William Ruto will be hosting what they call the Special Summit of the East African Heads of State to discuss the issue in the DRC. So this is definitely the biggest talking point today. Other quick highlights on the front pages, the Star.
26 counties targeted in EACC war on graft, and they've gone a different route.
All right. Grand cover-up, a different story altogether on the front page of the Standard. But there's another one there on the death of opposition, which will make some very good reading.
People Daily, Rigiji allies face X. Yeah, all right. An axe.
An axe. But they also make mention of what's happening in the DRC. Crisis talks over DRC as Kenyan Embassy attacked. So yes, it's imetufikia. Magavana 11 wamulikwa. Ni habari yenyewe imepewa kipaumbele kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo.
Business Daily, Dangote gets a piece of Kenya market with Java House deal. That's the top story in People Daily. But also DRC has been featured down there.
Yes. Kenyan Embassy in DRC attacked, which is a big diplomatic issue. And yes, even when you cross the border into Uganda, it is the same story on the front page of the Daily Monitor. Congo burns with anger. They say there's tension, the fall of Goma to M23 rebels and the escalating chaos in the DRC capital, Kinshasa, has drawn global attention and triggered calls for an immediate solution to the crisis. They've given this coverage for pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 14, and 15, meaning that this piece of news definitely affects the entire region. Uganda is among the countries whose embassy in Kinshasa was attacked. And you can see a gentleman there holding that signage for the Embassy of the Republic of Uganda, Kinshasa, DRC. So similar thing happened to Kenyan Embassy there. I've seen a letter by our Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, complaining but giving assurances that he's been in touch with the Foreign Affairs Minister of DRC. They said that they will reimburse. They will actually compensate Kenya for all the damages to the embassy. But Kenyan staff had to jump over fences and run away. Their safety, we're still not sure about it. So, yes. Big news across the region today.
New Vision, USAID freeze over 2,000 face job cuts. A list of affected agency inside experts warn of difficult times ahead. You know, I was taking a look at this photo because I was wondering what is happening there.
You thought it was DRC?
Yes.
New Vision has not made mention of DRC. Anyway, apart from Goma Airport falling to M23, wameka kadogo pale kwa kona pale chini. A story, I don't think our viewers can see it. Yeah. But at least on the Daily Monitor, it's a big story. So, okay, fine. This is another big story.
Yeah.
The WHO, whatever the US did in withdrawing its funding, it affects the USAID and affects a lot of other things. Now, this one's about job cuts. In Kenya, they're talking about the vaccines and immunizations, and Tanzania as well. But this one that had drawn your interest?
100 arrested in city operation. Now, in an effort to curb crime in Kampala City, over 100 suspected criminals, including those who target parents and learners going back to school, were yesterday arrested in an operation carried out along Naki-Vubo Channel, that is William Street, Nakasere, in Bombo Road, that is in Uganda. Right. Interesting. They're attacking parents.
Walikuwa sema nini? Sura Tinginya. Walikamatwa kule Kampala. All right, that's as far as Kampala news is concerned. Let's cross over and take a look at Tanzania. Their concern was something different because they are hosting the Energy Summit, and a lot of heads of state, including ours, William Ruto, was in attendance as well. A picture of most of the leaders there in attendance in Dar es Salaam. They say Africa embarks on 5-year plan to power 300 million people. African leaders yesterday pledged to deliver reliable, affordable and sustainable energy to 300 million people across the continent by 2030. marking a historic commitment. This is what was decided yesterday there. And just some of the funding that's going to come towards this. The African Development Bank has committed 18 billion US dollars, the World Bank 22 billion, Asian Investment Bank 1.5 billion, OPEC 1 billion, Islamic Development Bank 2.6 billion, and Rockefeller Foundation 20 billion shillings. And if at all this money comes, and this is an ambitious but very forward-looking headline, 300 million people to have access to electricity. The other story given prominence, yes, Tanzania, Kenya join forces to tackle rising cancer burden in women and girls. Women and girls in Tanzania and Kenya are set to benefit from a major boost in breast and cervical cancer screening through the East Africa Comprehensive Cancer Project. The story is on page 5 of this paper. That's The Citizen in Tanzania. I have not seen it anywhere on the front pages of our papers, but probably it's something that we should be focusing on as well. EAC calls for AI-powered customs to fight illicit trade. Will that happen? We have to wait and see. Pale juu masuala ya siasa, Nchimbi's nomination and impact on the 2030 presidential hopefuls. Nchimbi is Samia Suluhu Hassan's running mate in the coming elections in October this year. That's a Citizen in Tanzania. No mention of what's happening in DRC. Curiously, the Tanzanian embassy was not touched here in Kinshasa.
Hataki kuingilia maneno mengine. Haiwahusu. Anyway, Mwananchi kimeeleweka. That is their top story. And they say mpango wa kutokomeza giza Afrika sasa una uhakiki wa kutekelezwa. Benki ya Maendeleo Afrika, Benki ya Dunia kutenga zaidi ya shilingi trilioni 120 kufikisha umeme kwa watu milioni 300. Marais Afrika watoka na mambo 15 azimio la Dar es Salaam. Same story like the one in The Citizen.
To the Dar es Salaam Declaration, and we have a picture there of some of the heads of states who managed to attend that event.
Meneja Wambowe aeleza nafasi ya Lissu kuunganisha Chadema, matters politics as well in Tanzania. Imeandikwa kidogo kidogo hapo, we won't be able to see that. But pale in the top strip we see Ufaransa, Aga Khan kukabili saratani, Kenya, Tanzania, same story as well on Kenya and Tanzania's efforts to tackle cancer.
All right. Tukitoka Tanzania tuvuke border tuingie Rwanda, and Rwanda you cannot mention M23, DRC and not mention Rwanda. So on the on the front page of their main daily, they have this big picture of Congolese soldiers. This is a FADC soldiers, the main army of the DRC. DRC Congo soldiers flee to Rwanda. Now this is a very different angle, and you should realize what they've done here. They're not talking about M23, you know what has happened. They're not talking about Goma or Kinshasa. They're talking about the military in the DRC crossing over to seek refuge in Rwanda. Rwanda, they're very interesting. So they say Congolese soldiers who fled the to Rubavu through the Grand Barrier border post after being processed by Rwandan security agencies on Monday, January 27th. The FADC soldiers fled after losing the battle for control of Goma against the M23 rebels. So this is big news. And I think for Rwanda, this image gives them that victorious feeling that they've actually, DRC soldiers are seeking refuge in Rwanda. It should be the other way around. So they're feeling,
bado mnatuhitaji.
We should wait and see if at all Paul Kagame and even Felix Tshisekedi will actually show up for the EAC summit, Heads of State Summit today in Nairobi, to discuss the crisis in Congo. But in Rwanda, this paper also makes mention of the discussions in Dar es Salaam yesterday. 5 things to know as governments race to power 300 million Africans. 600 million people across the continent do not have access to electricity. So it is a big deal. Now we do have what we call the Dar es Salaam Declaration, the biggest declaration there, that they are going to power 300 million Africans. So this is a main discussion, what's happening in Congo, and the issue about energy that's beyond our borders, but affecting us as well. And we'll be back to take a look at this because it's also on our front pages of our local dailies. But for now, tuangazie maswala ya anga. And let's start off in Goma because tunasikia huko kuna joto sana. It's actually 17 degrees Celsius. A day or two after the city fell to the M23 rebels, it doesn't look as hot as the news coming from there. It's quite chilly, highs of 21 degrees Celsius, meaning hata ukifire a grenade, not too much fire. But a bit of precipitation expected there as well, 2.3 millimeters. So Goma, it's a bit chilly. Sunny intervals for a very short period during the morning, but cloud cover for the better part of the day. The other end of DRC is Kinshasa, which is farther south of the DRC. It's a bit hotter, way hotter, 24 degrees Celsius, feels like 27. Yes, it is hot, but cloudy. Cloud cover throughout the day, no chance of rain, 0.8 millimeters is very little sunlight as well. Highs of 32 degrees, meaning there's a lot of humidity in that area. Kinshasa is actually much closer to West Africa. Let's come back home and tusahau maswala ya DRC tutazungumzia baadaye. Start off in Meru.
Meru is 17 degrees as at now, highs of 22 degrees. Cloud cover for the better part of the day as well. There will be showers hapo katikati, so I think this is comfortable weather as well. Lakini vaa sweta, kutakuwa na mvua. 18 millimeters. Definitely it's raining in Meru today. You do expect that. Yeah. We cross to the coast and take a look at Kilifi. Feels like 27 degrees. It's 24 degrees as at now. Highs of 31 degrees. Comfortable weather, sunny throughout. So that's good weather.
If you're looking for some sun, Kilifi is the place to go for you. Finally, let's come back home and take a look at the city in the sun. 17 degrees Celsius as we speak. This is Nairobi. And as far as precipitation is concerned, 4.1 millimeters of rainfall. Yes, some showers. Do expect that across the county because we've seen what happened the last 2 days. A lot of flooding in very many parts of the city. Barabara hazipitiki. Mvua kidogo. Highs of 23 degrees Celsius today. Not very hot, so beba your brolly na a jacket if you can. That's the weather situation. Let's take a look at the traffic situation. Because of the flooding in some parts of Nairobi, definitely this is going to affect a lot of your travel this morning and across the day. And we do have the general map of the city. Let it adjust kidogo. We can see problems where they are. Thika Road not looking bad this morning. It's only about 10 minutes past the hour. Pangani interchange, it's building up slowly. Haile Selassie Avenue around Marikiti is also building up slowly. Jogoo Road, watu hawajamka bado. You can just see spots of yellow here and there. But we do expect that in the next few minutes, this will turn a deep red. Manyanja Pale, a bit of traffic as you do the interchange heading towards town. Part of Eastern Bypass as you get closer to Cabanas, moving from Utawala direction past the Taj Mall interchange. There's a bit of traffic there building up, which is a bit unusual. Langata Road, you can see there's a bit of traffic here, and this must be because of the flooding, probably, but this is right next to Wilson Airport. I don't know what exactly is happening there. There's so many flooding, maybe it has nothing to do with that. Ngong Road, a bit of slow traffic, especially once you get closer to the Prestige Plaza cross junction. On Wayaki Way, apart from Kangemi, it's smooth all the way into town, so nothing to worry about there. Today, not much to worry about. Traffic sio mbaya sana, but we'll be back to take a look at that later on.
All right, but now let's take a look at the quote of the day. The strongest people are not those who show strength in front of us, but those who win battles we know nothing about. Remember, every small victory is a testament to your resilience.
All right, let's now come back and take a look at the papers in depth. Right, and we start off with the Daily Nation. The screaming headline there on the front page, DRC erupts. The Kenyan, Ugandan, Rwandan, South African and US embassies in Congolese capital Kinshasa came under attack by rioters, protesting the seizure of Goma by Rwanda-backed M23 rebels, casting a global spotlight on a protracted conflict that has spiraled out of control in recent days. Meanwhile, President Ruto is today expected to host an extraordinary summit of the EAC heads of state to address the delicate security situation that is not only a threat to businesses, but also risks throwing the region into a costly humanitarian crisis. The Daily Nation has dedicated 2 pages, pages 2 and 3, to this piece of story. And a very dramatic picture there taken in Kinshasa yesterday. Protesters clashing with police officers in front of the French Embassy in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Definitely big news, and this because of the diplomatic angle that it has taken. You rarely attack an embassy. If you try to attack the DRC embassy in Kenya, it is Kenya itself that will take care of you. It will handle you properly. So what happened that the DRC was not able to protect 2, 3, 4, 5 embassies on their soil. That will definitely have repercussions. And President Tshisekedi, even if he shows up to Nairobi, he'll have some questions to answer. Because it's Goma is where the problem was. How come in Kinshasa, thousands of kilometers away, embassies are being attacked? So they say Kenya has demanded reparations from Kinshasa for embassy attack, as they should. Other quick highlights on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. State drafts new improved varsity funding model, and this will come as a relief for many university students. A new improved draft model on how the government will fund students in tertiary institutions is being developed following the scrapping of the previous plan by the High Court in December. The Education CS Julius Ogamba told this paper yesterday that the new proposed model is expected to come into effect in September, when the 2024 Form 4 leavers join universities and colleges. So what happens in the meantime? Because there are other continuing students, do they revert back to the old model? Because they still have to go to class. It's only January. If this new model is coming into effect in September, what happens in the meantime? That story is on the back page of this paper. When FBI came to EAC's help in war on graft, intervention of the US FBI helped Kenya's anti-graft agency recover 2.9 billion shillings in corruptly acquired assets last year, and also averted a potential loss of 16 billion shillings in public funds. The billions were recovered through both court cases and out-of-court settlements, and you can read more on that story on pages 6 and 7 of the Daily Nation. On the very top strip are 2 stories there, one to do with the IEBC. Koki Muli, who's now a member of the IEBC selection panel. They say from aspiring IEBC commissioner to sitting on panel to pick Paul's team. So there's a story of Koki Muli. And Matters Champions League, all to fight for on final day of group matches. Giants, Bayern, Real, Man City face elimination. The story is on page 31 of this paper. For lovers of the Champions League, mambo yanachemka pale. On the back page, of course, there's a story on that improved varsity funding model and what happens in the meantime. But there's a story about MPs pushing to anchor NGCDF in law amid legal roadblocks. And the argument has always been that the NGCDF is still unconstitutional because of the principle of separation of powers. How can MPs be the ones administering projects, yet their main job is to oversight the executive? So that's the Daily Nation this morning. We take a look at the Star now.
And the Star, 26 counties targeted in EACC war on graft. Now, Commission investigates 19 state corporations and 5 public universities. And that story is on page 4 and 5 of this newspaper. And they say for the officers who failed, the Commission recommended administrative action to the respective institutions, and cases with criminal thresholds were investigated and sent to the DPP. Now, at least 26 county governments, 19 state corporations, 5 universities, and 2 constitutional commissions are on the radar of anti-corruption detectives. That is the story given prominence there on the Star. We see Raila campaigns at Africa Energy Summit. That was yesterday in Tanzania. And we see a photo of Raila Odinga there, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, and we also see Kenya's President William Ruto. Yeah, he's campaigning for AUC. The elections are next month, remember. And they make mention of lawyers petition JSE for removal of Goma and Supreme Court judges, and that story is on page 2 of the Star. And they say 13 lawyers from the firm of Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi Advocates LLP have now petitioned the Judicial Service Commission for the removal of Chief Justice Martha Koome and all other 6 judges of the Supreme Court. Remember, Martha Koome said she has no reason to resign. Give her a reason, and well, she'll see to it. Tujui kama ata resign, lakini mumpe reason. Have you ever seen any Kenyan resigning? One famously said, I'd rather die than resign. Chaos as Kenyan Embassy in DR Congo torched. They make mention of that as well. The Kenyan Embassy in Kinshasa was among diplomatic missions targeted by protesters disgruntled by the M23 and allied forces attack on the city of Goma on Monday, and that story is on page 6 of the Star. In courts, Wairimu fights to block Cohen murder charge, and Sarah Wairimu has moved to the High Court seeking to halt her impending prosecution over the murder of husband Tob Cohen. She is accusing the DPP of abusing his prosecutorial powers. Remember, this is the second time Sarah is being taken to court for that particular case. Wiper uneasy with Kalonzo Gachagua deal. Matters politics there, and Wiper members in Mombasa are pushing to revive the party in the county and coast amid reservations among some bigwigs about the imminent pact between Kalonzo Musyoka, Martha Karua, Uhuru Kenyatta, and Rigathi Gachagua. This was was it on Sunday when they joined for that DAPK. All right. At the back page, we see Safari loaded, and 2025 Safari Rally introduced 2 new fresh stages, organizers reveal. And Salim Vuria says they are committed to ensuring everyone stays in the loop, of course, as they deliver another world-class Safari Rally. That's the Star.
All right. Let's move on to the next paper, and this is a Standard, a totally different kind of story. They talk about a grand cover-up. Where's the truth, they ask? A Nakuru fisherman went to fend for his family, but 10 days later, Kenya Wildlife Service officers who arrested him now claim he escaped. Police have no idea where he is, and the courts, his mother and wife are also clueless. In these times of forced disappearances, questions linger on what actually happened to Brian Odhiambo. The story is on page 4 of the Standard, and they give a chronology of events on what happened between January 18th and January 30th.
What will happen?
When the court is expected to give further directions in the case, and this is what this paper knows about the events. Death of opposition, a boon for Ruto. This is the other big discussion locally, and many people, and you heard the panelists yesterday, really dismissing this new planned grand coalition. They're calling it death of opposition. Since Raila Odinga was co-opted to the government, the Azimio coalition has faltered and started. What was meant to be a strong unit to check government excesses has been reduced to a shell, issuing sporadic statements intended to pressure the executive, which are sometimes contradictory. That story is on page 6. Debate is rife on whether or not we really have
strong opposition.
Substantive opposition, yes. Paleju, tensions rise in DRC as protesters attack embassies. Same story, big discussion across the region. Alarm as 100 women are killed in 6 months. Job scare, Saudi Arabia deaths double. That's very worrying. And the Elephants vow to defend AFCON title. The Elephants are a football team. Sio wale Elephants walikuwa nakuwa compared to chicken yesterday. All right, back page, Ivory Coast will hold on to AFCON trophy, promises Coach Faye, and those are the Elephants they're talking about. So matters to do with AFCON. And yes, the draw is out. Tanzania and Uganda are in one group. Kenya is nowhere to be seen, yet we're supposed to be hosting the next tournament after this, which is the 2027 tournament. So if you're still interested in following up on AFCON, the Standard is your go-to paper today. People
Daily, they say Rigiji allies face arcs. And Paj MPs who stood with impeached former deputy president expected to be kicked out of key committees after House resumes. And that story is on page 4 of the People Daily with Cindy Ndinyoro, Jane Kihara, that is Njeri Minor, There's a Sekilenku, we see Gathoni wa Mushomba, and of course Karungo Thangwa.
So we do expect the houses to reconvene sometime next month after a long recess. They call it the Christmas recess. Watu wataona moto.
And you see, they say here, allies of impeached Deputy President Gachagua are scheduled to be kicked out of parliamentary committees when the National Assembly reconvenes in 2 weeks' time. Plans are understood to have been finalized to replace more than 40 MPs believed to owe allegiance to Gachagua in committees of both the National Assembly and the Senate. Now, interestingly, yesterday, National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula directed the leaders of majority and minority to expedite the process of reconstituting the 18 committees whose life came to an end during the last parliamentary session.
Yes, the MPs, especially the National Assembly, are currently converging in Naivasha in preparation for the resumption of their sessions next month.
Yeah. They also make mention of the situation at DRC and crisis talks over DRC as Kenyan Embassy attacked. There is a meeting today, like we mentioned earlier, with the EAC heads of state.
Right. Finally, or not finally, we still have Business Daily to look at. Tuangazie gazeti la Taifa Leo, habari kuu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wanasema magavana 11 wamulikwa. Serikali 11 za kaunti zinachunguzwa na tume ya maadili na kupambana na ufisadi EACC kuhusiana na madai ya ubadhirifu wa fedha uliosababisha kupotea kwa shilingi bilioni 6.3. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili, wanasema EACC yachunguza kaunti kuhusiana na ufujaji fedha, matumizi mabaya ya mamlaka na ukiukaji wa sheria. Kuna picha kadhaa za magavana pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele, sijui kama ni hawa wanachunguzwa, lakini sio sisi tumeka picha zao, ni gazeti hili la Taifa Leo.
A face to the name.
Ukitaka kujua magavana, kama kuna gavana hapa wa Vihiga anaitwa Wilberforce Otichilo, gavana wa Garissa anaitwa Nadhif Jama, gavana wa Nairobi pia yuko pale Johnson Sakaja, Nyeri Mutahi Kahiga, Gideon Mung'aro wa Kilifi, wapi Ochilo yako wa Migori, na hata hapa Kajiado Olelenku, Joseph Olelenku yuko pale, pamoja na West Pokot Simon Kachapin. Pale chini wasema wataalamu hupanga kashfa. EACC nasema tume yasema wanaopanga kashfa kubwa ni watu wenye ujuzi wa juu. So corruption is actually planned by very experienced people and experts, the so-called experts. Sio tu watu hivi hivi. Na wenye baa wakemea ada za polisi. Wamiliki baa wadai polisi wanalemaza biashara zao kwa kudai hongo kila mwezi. Na hii ni gazeti la Taifa Leo. Pale juu wasema Ivory Coast Cameroon AFCON 2025. Draw ya mwaka huu imekutanisha baadhi ya timu mahiri kundi moja. Nilisema Tanzania na Uganda kwa kundi moja. Lakini Kenya haina kundi, Kenya haipo.
Hatuonekani. All right, Business Daily, Dangote gets a piece of Kenyan market with Java House deal. Now, the Africa's richest man, that is Aliko Dangote. Akiweza sikia nimebucha jina yake sasa hivi. All right, he's set to get a piece of Kenya's food and beverages market after a private equity firm backed him to prepare, of course, to acquire restaurant chain Java House for an undisclosed amount. Now, Dangote, alongside other investors, backing Altera Capital, the African-focused private equity fund that is seeking regulatory approval to acquire a majority stake in Java from UK-based actors. All right. And the Kenya Eurobond yields rise despite Moody's upgrade. And interest rates on Kenyan Eurobonds have risen slightly, showing a negative response from investors despite ratings outlook upgrade by Moody's. KRA nets 2 billion Kenyan shillings in first month of extended amnesty. Now, the Kenya Revenue Authority has collected 2 billion in the first month of an extended tax amnesty program, representing 6.7% of the total targeted amount. And KEB suspends Chinese steel maker on poor quality claims. Fund managers beat investment banks in net assets growth. And that's the Business Daily.
Right. As we wrap up a review of our dailies today, remember the regional papers still giving prominence to the DRC crisis. Let's take a look at the cartoons today. We start off with the one on the Standard. There's a big box there on someone's head, written 2027. But in the same gentleman's pocket, he has the IEBC selection panel. And there's a gentleman there holding a Bible, basically swearing in, and he says, "So help me God." Are we saying that they've already been compromised even before they start? That's a cartoon on the Standard, and I'm just asking a question. Watu wanakasirika bure, mimi si mimi nimesema.
All right, this is the one of the People Daily, the Star. That is the Star. And we see President William Ruto here. We see, that is the DAPK, whatever was formed on Sunday. We see Eugene Wamalwa, Rigathi Gachagua, Kalonzo Musyoka, ambao wameshikwa pale na Eugene Wamalwa. Yeah, but nashangaa huu ni nani ameweka hapo kwa mfuko?
Jamaa ameweka kwa mfuko, ule jamaa wa AUC. Ameweka kwa mfuko hapa nyuma. Same debate, that debate about chicken versus the elephants, and are they saying that you need all these heads to just take on this one? Well, that's a cartoon on the Star. Take a look at the cartoon on the Daily Nation today, and makes mention of the same, the fact that during this period, we've entered a phase of party launches. Rigathi Gachagua has already said he's going to launch his party very soon. It was Eugene Wamalwa's turn to launch a party office in Nairobi. Kalonzo Musyoka is also trying to launch something else. So what happens, we have this seesaw. DAP is already done launching its Nairobi office. Someone else is jumping on the seesaw and saying, "Return the favor at my launch too." So when nilikuja kwa launch yako na nika inject, ukiwa na yangu kuja uinject hapo. So we're going to see a lot of those events, and they'll be used to inject. Na kuna jamaa hapa anaitwa Peter Salasia, and he's interestingly, he's making it to all the cartoons nowadays. He's made it. He's made it. Hey, Salasia, you've made it. That's the Daily Nation, finally the People Daily.
And we see President William Ruto, they are milking something. He's saying, "Ikai ng'ombe." And you
Imekonda mpaka ikai ng'ombe.
Yes. Inaitwa pay slips pale. And the president is quoted saying pale juu na huyu caricaturist akisema, "Whether you call me Zakayo, Kasongo or Kaongo, we must pay taxes."
We, hiyo ng'ombe imekamuliwa kweli kweli.
Na anaendelea pay slip.
Amesema muspende. Taxes mutalipa. Those are the cartoons today. And these are the papers we're looking at. Just a quick run through the regional papers, talking about energy in Africa, talking about what's happening in the DRC. Congo burns with anger. Once you come home, some ESCC stories, politics of parliament, opposition politics, as well as a big one, DRC erupts. So let me just take you through the panel this we've planned for you today, this morning. On State of the Nation, which comes after the break, Dr. Njogu Barua, former MP Gishugu, will be in studio for that conversation, alongside Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst, advocate of the High Court Silas Akiro, and political analyst Josephat Kamanya. Do stand by for that conversation. Later on, today being Wednesday, kuna maneno ya mapenzi hapa.
All right, we'll be having this conversation on healing from relationship trauma. Sijui kama wewe, you're part of that gang.
Uzuri ya kuzeeka ni ati unaharden tu vizuri.
All right, Dr. Julius Kimani, a counselor, will be here again to help us, of course, with this conversation. And we have an even bigger panel.
We're saying overcoming the past and embracing the future. Hey.
You see, these young men and women, we have a show today.
Oh, yes. Do stand by for this conversation. It's going to be very interesting. All right.
Pale social media, interact with us at TV47 Kenya on Facebook and YouTube, TV47 News KE on X. My handle is at Anna_Dida. The hashtag is Morning Cafe.
My handle on X is at Fred Ndimule.
Stay with us.
Are you ready to elevate your business game?
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara, huwezi kaa bure, unajipanga taratibu vile inavyofaa.
Join us each week as we dive into the stories of the world's most driven entrepreneurs.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
The Grind, where business meets brilliance. Tune in every Monday at 7:30 p.m. because your business deserves the best.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia safari za viongozi bora. Kutoka kwa ushindi mkubwa hadi masomo magumu.
Wakati wetu kwamba wasichana si wa kusoma, ni wa kuolewa, ng'ombe ipatikane, wazazi wakuwa watajiri.
Tunashughulikia yote.
I wish I were a better investor.
My parents taught me how to look for things for myself.
Tazama Mfahamu Kiongozi, ambapo kila kipindi kimejaa maarifa, mikakati na hadithi za kukuza azma yako.
For me to succeed, I have to fight.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30.
Are you ready to elevate your business game?
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara, huwezi kaa bure.
Morning Cafe on TV 47. Time for the state of the nation. A quick look at the big headlines. DRC erupts is a big headline on the front page of the Daily Nation. Other local dailies have that same story on the front pages, but some slight mention here and there. The headlines are quite varied. But if you look across the region in Africa, in East Africa, I think DRC erupts. That's the Daily Nation. On the Daily Monitor, they talk about chaos in DRC. And yes, Congo burns with anger. That's the Daily Monitor in Uganda. And in Rwanda, the New Times of Rwanda talks about DRC soldiers crossing into Rwanda to seek refuge after the fall of Goma. So it is indeed a big story, and it's also part of the stories we covered, especially following the fact that protesters in Kinshasa attacked the Kenyan Embassy there. And let's watch that story.
On Monday, M23 rebels allegedly backed by Rwanda seized control of Goma. Since then, Goma has become a battleground. Thousands have been forced to flee their homes, while 17 are reported dead, with scores injured. Protests rocked Kinshasa, DRC's capital, today, with rioters storming and attacking embassies of Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, South Africa, France and Belgium, criticizing them for inaction towards the conflict in Goma, situated in the eastern region of DRC. The attack on the Kenyan Embassy has been condemned by Foreign Affairs CS Musalia Mudavadi, stating that there were plans by demonstrators to also storm and attack the South African, USA and Belgian embassies. Mudavadi has termed the attacks on the embassies, looting and destruction of property as a grave violation of international law.
It is evident in certain areas that as they were looting, there were security agencies just standing by, seeming to abate the process of destruction.
Tomorrow, a high-level emergency meeting will be held by member states drawn from the East African community, chaired by President William Ruto, in their attempt to address this conflict. Rwanda President Paul Kagame and his DRC counterpart Felix Tshisekedi are expected to participate in the summit.
My sister. My president.
Meanwhile, in Tanzania today, President William Ruto held talks with UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed, where she expressed the UN support for the meeting scheduled for Wednesday, as well as the regional efforts by the East African Community heads of state to end the hostilities in eastern DRC. In this conflict, Rwanda has since been accused of supporting the March 23 movement rebels by the Congo government. Rwanda, in its defense, denies such support and faults the Congo government for failing to protect its citizens by entering a dialogue with the M23. Sheila Chelangat for TV 47.
It is indeed a big talking point this morning and throughout the day, not just in Kenya, but the region as well. Allow me to welcome to the panel this morning Josephat Kamanya, political analyst. It's good to have you in studio.
Good morning, Alfred.
And for the first time ever on TV 47 Morning Cafe, we do have Dr. Njogu Barua, a former MP Gishugu constituency, who makes a comeback to TV. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too.
Karibu sana.
Good morning.
Yes, TV 47. So this is a big story, what you're seeing, DRC erupts. But what is more of concern is Kenya's involvement in all this. Yesterday we saw that Kenya was lumped alongside Uganda, Rwanda, who have been already accused of supporting the M23 rebels in the kind of attacks we saw protesters targeting embassies. Belgium, they're not so happy with them. The US, South Africa, who have all been accused of supporting the rebels. So seeing Kenya lumped in that same list, it should worry us. A day when we hope to lead talks about the same crisis, Bwana Kamanya.
Yes, Fred, a very good morning to our viewers and a quick reminder to all our road users, let's be safe, avoid any incidents and accidents. I think the DRC is a regional issue, and it's unfortunate that it is happening right now and that we are experiencing loss of life. We have always tried to spearhead a peaceful region, East African region. And having our president now as the chair of the community, it does not sit very well to see us, as you say, being lumped up in the list of suspected or alleged supporters. I think of late we've been talking about diplomatic relations and how the Kenyan image as a country is coming out. This is another concern because how much trust would the players, the peace seekers for DRC have in having a country like ourselves, Kenya, spearhead the conversation, and yet we are suspected already to be affiliated to one side. And you see, we have no particular interest in a manner of speaking, direct interest, unlike Uganda and Rwanda, because I think by and large we may want to understand exactly what is happening. And I see it as a battle for extension of territory and conquering territory. A bit of history, if you look at in the early 2000s, there was a group, FDLR, that comes from Rwanda. It was a group of rebels. And remember, this has been just a conclusion of the fight, the second war in Rwanda. So they sought refuge in Congo. And somehow they've been in operation in one or the other, and they feel they're legitimately Congolese now, so they should occupy and settle in the land. And then on the other front, you have the M23, who are the Congolese militia. And they're feeling that these people should leave and go back to their country. They should go back to Rwanda, and others should go back to Uganda. And then there is an inclination, the M23 are closer to Uganda. They are largely Ugandans by extension, like the way we have the Luos in Kenya, Sudan, Uganda as well. So it is an extended community, and they are all seeking to protect their territory, because if you protect and conquer territory, then also resources become your own. That's why you're hearing Rwanda being accused of supporting a section of the militia. You hear Uganda also being accused. So Kenya, we are a bit far in terms of a boundary vicinity. So unless we have economic interest, or unless we have Kenyan characters who are players in that war, that should be now an area of concern. But if we don't, I think we should be able to spearhead a peaceful conversation, because all nations are seeking to extend and conquer. Remember, we had an issue with Somalia a few years ago, and they're trying to take our coastal line, saying that it should go straight and not the other way. So it is a territorial issue, and I just hope it is addressed amicably and very fast, because it could easily erupt to larger than it is.
But once our embassy is attacked, that's a statement by itself that we do not trust you. Today, President William Ruto expects that both President Paul Kagame and Felix Tshisekedi will show up in Nairobi for those discussions. But seeing your embassy attacked, do you still expect that that these two leaders will actually show up in Nairobi for the meeting?
I think I would like to say that I start by saying that what is happening in DRC Congo is really a tragic situation for the country. It's tragic for the region, and it's tragic for Africa as a continent, because this is not time when you should be looking at conflicts, ethnic conflicts, or conflicts between neighboring countries. It will not augur for development or for regional cooperation and integration. I would like to say that this is not a new conflict. It's been going on, and I remember when President Ruto was sworn in, the first person he appointed was the former President Uhuru Kenyatta to mediate in the Congo crisis. But unfortunately, that process don't go for long. Looks like they have stalled for some reason or the other. The other thing is that the fact that our embassy has been attacked, it is not necessarily a manifestation of relations between two countries. Because when there is chaos, people may behave in different ways. We cannot justify why they are attacking one embassy and not the other. Although it's also an indication that there's something they have against Kenya in relation to that conflict. So what I can say is that since this is a serious conflict, it is a humanitarian conflict, I expect the president of DRC Congo, the president of Rwanda, to appear in those talks, because it is their duty and responsibility to safeguard the lives of each and every one of their citizens. So I expect them to be here, and I hope their negotiations will bear fruit, because I know from what I can see on TV is really a terrible situation, which can also expand or extend to the neighboring countries of Rwanda and Uganda, as my colleague has stated, that their interests from two countries, Rwanda and neighboring countries, Rwanda and Uganda. And those communities cut across, like Maasais of Kenya and Tanzania, or Somalis of Kenya and Somalia, and so forth. So this peaceful environment must be restored. So it's my wish and hope that Kagame and Tshisekedi will appear and push the process of peace and reconciliation forward.
All right. Allow me to welcome Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst, to this conversation. Good morning, Arnold. We're talking about the big headline of the front page of the Daily Nation, DRC erupts. It is the big headline on major dailies across the region as well. News from DRC and the crisis in Goma definitely making big news. But it's Kenya's involvement in this crisis that you're focusing on. Of course, President William Ruto is in that position as EAC chairperson that he has to be right in the middle of this conversation. Today he's hoping to host the leaders of the region to discuss the crisis. But before that, we're already seeing Kenya's embassy being attacked in DRC, and questions are being asked. What have we done wrong? And are we still able to act as arbiters in this crisis when we are being targeted? It could be an accusation that we have taken sides already, Arnold.
I think it's rather straightforward why the masses in Kinshasa feel aggrieved by Nairobi. It doesn't have to be necessarily justified, but then in a crisis, justification and rationale normally is thrown out with the wind. You will remember that we have been chairing the process, the negotiation between M23 and rather the two sides. It's not even one side. It's much more, or rather it's much more than one side, or rather two sides. So we've been chairing that process. President Uhuru Kenyatta has actually been working around that. Then we called it the Angola process. The last time he went there, there was a part that didn't show up. But then the major issue why we saw masses attacking our embassy is pegged on this. We were leading the East African force that had actually been sent in Goma to actually stand in between the DRC army and the M23 in between. But suffice to say this, that our military, while there, diplomatically stopped the fall of Goma. Goma did not fall on our watch. When Jeff Nyaga was there, and at some point there was a very rusty relationship between Jeff Nyaga as the commander of that particular force and the administration in Kinshasa. Because midway, the administration in Kinshasa felt that they didn't want a peacekeeping force, they wanted a fighting force. And that is why we were unceremoniously asked out of that particular place, because they wanted people a team that would fight. M23 at that particular point. But the mandate, when we went in, the mandate was so simple. We were supposed to sit in as a buffer between these two sides, so that then we can actually take care of the people, protect the people, the town. And you will realize that during that particular time, we got a lot of ground. M23 ceded a lot of ground, diplomatically moved across. So, and a good soldier is one who wins a war without fighting. That's the truth. So on our side, we didn't fall on our watch. Goma did not fall on our watch.
So we cannot feign...
We cannot be surprised that
our involvement definitely. We have a footprint there.
We have a footprint, and that is what is actually causing the bad blood, because the Kinshasa side expected that we would join their forces and actively fight so that we pick sides. But the EAC force in between, or rather the mandate of the EAC force was clear at that particular point too. They call it the EACRF, was there to sit in between, to act as a buffer, to protect the population and to stop the escalation. And we did that very well, without firing as much as a shot. Unfortunately, of course, we have got at least a soldier who died, Kenya Air Force soldier, one who died before we came back. And then we were unceremoniously asked out. But then we can't then now start, it's a crisis, we can't then cover ourselves out of it and say this. You will remember that there is what is called the First African War. It was fought in that area. Then there is a Second African War. A lot of people, it's fairly recent history, because the First African War, I think, was in 1998. Then the Second African War was later on, I think, in 2003, 4, or 5. I might not remember very well. It's in the same theater. So it now looks like the Eastern DRC looks like a tinderbox of this particular region. That is the place that most likely a crisis will come from. Actually, from where we sit, there is already tanks wagging that could this be the third all-African war? Because you will remember there were other players who came in during the first, what is called the first all-African war, and then the second one. That place has proved to be the graveyard of very serious militaries.
But where does that leave Nairobi now in terms of providing a safe, comfortable ground for all these parties to come discuss? Because today we expect that meeting. But are we certain that all the parties will show up for the talks?
I have seen a The launch of I have seen a post by an ambassador from DRC who apparently served with when we had the East African Youth Council. She's now an ambassador in her country. She's always been very critical about Nairobi, of course saying that Nairobi is impartial and stuff. I want to simply say that, you know, Nairobi has been for the longest time the region's diplomatic center where you come to, because literally we do not have any personal interest. We don't share a border with them. The Congolese have actually been coming to Nairobi Nairobi has been a refuge for the Congolese for the longest time. And the easiest thing is actually to ask the administration in DRC to still consider Nairobi as the brother they've always done. Because even when we put in our soldiers, they did not have any side. We were unaligned even when we put in soldiers and led that particular mission. Okay. So our place in this is so simple, is to up our diplomacy. Somebody has to be an adult in this particular situation, and however much the passions that are around on both sides, this show is not very competent to actually go the tactical way, because if we were to speak about the tactical way, we might spoil a lot of things. But for the time being, let us ask that Kinshasa treats Nairobi as that brother who has always held their hand. And we've walked with them a long way. It's only fair
it's when
that
they
they give
the embassy that you wonder if we still hold that position as big brother. But then again, we had President William Ruto talking about the fact that he held a discussion with the French President Macron on this, and a lot of criticism.
Yes.
People asking him, okay, why are you talking to Macron about an issue in DRC? Probably you're part of the problem. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that was not a very well calculated post. The conversation may have happened, and if it did, towards peace, that is fine. But I don't think that was something to come out and pronounce ourselves on as Kenyans. Because one, remember, the French have had a lot of interest in Congo. The whole mining industry and many other operations down there are run by the French. And it is the same French operations that some of the militias want out of Congo. So when we come out as Kenya and say we've spoken with the oppressor, it will not sit well. So, you know, when you are seeking peace, one of the most diplomatic and sensitive thing to observe is any statement that you make, because it can easily trigger emotions. And remember this, when it comes to terms of war, emotions run very high. And whenever there is suspect, whenever there is mistrust, then nobody is going to be willing to be part of your process. And now Kenya being a chair in terms of a country, it puts us in a very awkward position whereby we must be very impartial. We must be willing to make sure that any party that is coming on the table, whether it is the Rwandese, whether it is the Congolese, whether it is the Ugandan parties coming to negotiate, they feel that we are already giving them a clean slate for everybody to come and be listened to and find a solution. But when already you are seeming, especially now, to speak to foreign agencies that are known to perpetrate and perpetuate not just war, but also exploitation and extortion in Africa, it really doesn't look very well.
Bonanjogu Barua, do you see some naivety in terms of Kenya's diplomatic moves? We've been accused for the past 2 years of having very many diplomatic accidents or mishaps, if I may call them that. Do you think that's what we are suffering from now?
I think that could be it. Could be because what I think is that what the post by the president, that he had a discussion with Macron, was actually ill-timed. It should not have been released because Kenya is supposed to be a neutral party in the peace negotiations. So what I can say is that the president, being the chair, can talk to as many parties as possible to ensure that he succeeds or Kenya succeeds in its mission. But whatever they are doing in the back office must not necessarily be put in the social media or the mainstream media because it could compromise the intended outcomes. In this case, you have got three parties. No, you have got two parties. That's the Kinshasa side and the rebels. Kinshasa is the government. So the government of Kinshasa has a direct communication mechanism with the government of Kenya and the government of France. By M23 rebels, I don't think they have got that avenue to talk officially with the government of France or the government of Kenya. So that's one thing President Ruto would have actually considered, that if he makes that an announcement, it would just make Kenya look as a suspect, as if he's taking sides. Number two, A time has come, I think we are 60 years into independence as Africa. And in fact, this country is producing one of the candidates for the African Union. And the last debate which I had, one of the key issues was conflict resolution. Is the new African Union Commission chairperson going to be able to spearhead peace initiatives in Africa? Before we go to the foreign people, the foreign masters, our former colonizers, I think, in my own opinion, we should exhaust our local African mechanisms, our local African capacities. It's only after that, if we are not able to get solution locally, we can call for external forces. So what I can say is that to me, I think it may not have been done in bad faith, but it was a goof in one or the other. When I look at the nation here, there is a statement which says that Kenya has demanded reparation from Kinshasa for the embassy attack. So Kenya is already asking for reparation, that's payment. To me, I think this is neither here nor there. We are in a state of conflict. The first thing we should ensure happens is that the conflict is over, peace is restored, then we can go back now and argue for what is owed to us, so that it can be paid. So this is another...
I can see Maliba disagreeing, but I'll give you an opportunity once we come out of the break. We're taking a break. You're watching Morning Cafe right here at TV47. We continue with this discussion on the crisis in the DRC.
Are you ready to elevate your business game?
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara, huwezi kaa bure, unajipanga taratibu vile inavyofaa.
Join us each week as we dive into the stories of the world's most driven entrepreneurs.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
The Grind, where business meets brilliance. Tune in every Monday at 7:30 p.m. because your business deserves the best.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in? I was number 2. What position were you? Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. We continue looking at the headlines with my panelists, Josephat Kamanya, political analyst, Dr. Njogu Barua, former MP Gachagua, and Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst. Just before the break, Bwana Barua mentioned the fact that Kenya has demanded reparations from the government of DRC for that attack on our embassy, and you're saying that this is not the time. But Maliba, you seem to disagree with that. Yes.
My disagreement is that there is the Vienna Convention that all of us must adhere to. Even in war, there are international laws that are adhered to by combatants. The people in Kinshasa were not combatants. Our consulate in Goma has not been touched, and that is where action is. So the action in Kinshasa must be condemned. We cannot be soft about it. Because number one, we are not party to the conflict. We are only trying to help them solve it. So venting their anger on that one, I do not agree with Mheshimiwa here saying that we should have let it lie low. That is impunity, and international impunity that cannot be allowed to go on. It was Kinshasa's duty. Every time you accept to host any embassy or foreign mission, you have to protect it. So that is our territory that was attacked. So we cannot sit here and actually say that that is fine. We cannot justify that for whatever reason. There is no reason why anyone, like for example, when you say that, we are in Nairobi, right? Yeah. As in, we know so many Congolese who've lived in Nairobi. If we were to use that rationale, that we do not care about international law, that the Vienna Conventions and all those important protocols that we've signed as a people do not matter, then what stops Kenyans here? Or do you think that we as a people do not have people who are not irrational? We have got Kenyans who actually can also do the same and take the law in their hands. But Nairobi will not allow that, because Nairobi has committed to those laws that we will protect first and foremost the Congolese embassy in Nairobi, and we will ensure that every person who is here, even if they are Congolese, because if you do that, then the next thing is that the Kenyans who are doing their business legitimately in that particular land are going to be targeted. That we cannot justify.
Haven't we gotten there already, Bwana Kamanya?
Yes.
Yes, Bwana Kamanya, then I come to you,
Okay.
Barua.
But
the
then,
fact that
Fred,
Kenyans, we do a lot of business with DRC.
Correct.
This perception that has already been created that somehow Kenya is not very friendly to them, many Kenyans have not understood that part, and many Kenyans are asking, okay, what did we do? But there's something definitely we must have done to act people in Kinshasa to that extent.
Well, and some of these statements are not very palatable in a manner of speaking. Remember, we've been accused of being so close with the Congolese president. So the militia definitely will not like that. We've had allegations going around that even some of the Kenyan business people and people in leadership are running large farms in Congo. So there's some direct and indirect interest, and that becomes an area of conflict. That is one. Number two, when it comes to now matters of national and regional interest, there is a procedure and a process of addressing each and every aggrieved person. Today is not the day to ask for reparations. Not today. Today we should be seeking a ceasefire and a settlement plan, because you can see scores of people are really displaced. And when these people, you know, this has been an ongoing conflict, and we don't want to have a third African war. These people will either fall into Rwanda, others will fall into Uganda. And then we as Kenyans, remember, people who walk across borders are people who do not have the wherewithal or the muscle to relocate. Kenya will have a backlash of a certain population falling back here. And this is how we've ended up with a lot of refugees from Sudan, from Somalia, and many other neighboring countries. And we've had to contend with the issue of assimilation. Today we have a lot of Somalis living in Kenya who are not Kenyans. They should be going back to their country should the peaceful missions success. So we don't have to have a replica of the same coming from the other region. But now we have the monumental responsibility as a country to spearhead the process. Anything we say, anything we do, any initiatives that we are able to trigger, either here locally or with international players, because there are many agencies who are coming into play. You know, these people will be needing aid in terms of food, medication. If the rains hit us in the month of February, that becomes another human crisis. So we need to have a forethought on how we want to place ourselves. But most importantly, we must redeem our image as a country. We must be able to facilitate the, and if we cannot, we should put ourselves away from the process. It is okay to walk away, because again, remember, the Rwandese and the Congolese president, they do not see eye to eye. So I even doubt they'll be showing up today for the meeting. Remember, there were calls that they did not respond to earlier in the week and also late last week. A lot has been happening. So I hope that as a country we'll be able to redeem our image so that we can be a place of peace and refuge and remain the hub of Africa that we have been known to be.
Okay, Barua, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say that I respect the views of Wakili, and I want to state and emphasize that what I was responding to is whether Kenya made goofs in that communication. In my response, I don't advocate that we should ignore international law or accountability as nations. We should be able to do that. The question I was addressing is, was that a strategic point to ask for reparations? The war has just started. It is now this climax. Is it the time to ask for reparations? It's justified for Kenya to ask for them, for reparations. But my question was the timing.
Yes.
I want to say that the issue, we cannot compare DRC Congo or Goma and Kenya in the present day today. Because Kenya is largely peaceful, the government is in control. So the government can easily respond to questions of whatever nature that comes on its side. But there's a moment now, there's some disorder in Goma, and by extension the entire DRC, because when one part of your body is injured, the whole body is affected. And Kenya, coming as an arbitrator, as a leader in the process, should be able to show a lot of neutrality. And my response was based on the issue that when you ask for reparations today, and you are reading the process, we start showing our interests. We are interested in getting this from this process, this particular time. To me, it should have come later. So it's a matter of strategy, and if Kenya intends to achieve a lot or anything in these negotiations, we as a country and the leadership must be very strategic and appear to be as neutral as possible.
All right.
I also respect what Makidi said, that Goma did not fall under our watch. Because when we are having a peace mission there, Goma was largely under control. We did not have many attacks as we are having today. But the issue here is one of the things, as a person who I think that we are told to move out, is because the Kinshasa side was hoping that they can talk to government of Kenya, government to government, so that they can help them to push the rebels out of DRC. And that's why there is an issue of fighting force and a peacekeeping force. So the Kinshasa side would have preferred a fighting force, and not a fighting force fighting Kinshasa side, but fighting the rebels so they can get rid of them. It's about interests,
yes,
and securing the leadership position of the country.
There's definitely a lot of interests, a lot of complication with the crisis in DRC. Final word on this.
Before you move to another topic, it's important to actually not allow this particular conversation in this morning to fall into the bigger web of social media spins that have actually put Nairobi in this particular place. Nairobi is a victim of propaganda. Okay. Number one, there is nothing wrong the president did by calling Macron, for example. He is a major player in this particular conflict. The president reached out to every stakeholder of consequence and of note. And it is actually intelligence-led and informed. And for accountability purposes, in conflicts, I can talk to Mheshimiwa Barua here in secret.
Yes.
And then because he knows that he will not be held accountable, he will continue and do whatever he does. If any other person knows that I spoke to him and he committed, he will be held accountable. So there is nothing wrong. You cannot fault Nairobi for reaching out to every major stakeholder in this particular process, including the French, who play a very vital role in that particular triangle. So there was nothing wrong. Secondly, Nairobi cannot even act as an arbiter.
Even if it antagonizes any of the sides?
Look at this. In this particular situation, we are at a place where we cannot remove ourselves. Already we are chairing the EAC. Already we had our soldiers on the ground. There were perceptions that were formed. Our soldiers actually left the ground because we lost the propaganda war. We lost the propaganda war, mostly pushed by the other side. So you cannot carve yourself out of it. But then to actually be at a place where we are saying that you cannot ask for reparations. By the way, for records, Kenya did not ask for reparations. We reached out in condemnation and concern because, number one, what would be the foreign affairs business when your mission is falling and you say, okay, there is a war, so we don't care about the safety of our people, even though we have got the Vienna Convention of 1961 that every country actually ascribes to. When our mission goes down in fire and we are not combatants, when our personnel are actually threatened, you do not expect a country to actually sit and say, okay, and by the way, where our embassy was banned is 2,400 kilometers from the place of action. There is no excuse on why our embassy was attacked and it was not protected. There was no excuse. From Goma to Kinshasa is 2,400 kilometers. So there is totally no excuse. And Kenyans, please, including those of us who were here in the morning, let us not be too soft. We are giving away too much ground. And that people, like for example, the Congolese in Nairobi are walking out peacefully, their embassy is peaceful because we respect the law, not because we cannot be stupid and irrational. So when we sit here and look like we are propping up bad manners, whatever happened in Kinshasa was bad manners and it must be called out for what it is. Let them just respect the international law. We are not combatants. We do not have our soldiers on the ground. They asked us to leave. We left. We are only trying to help. So attacking a foreign mission, there is no excuse to that.
I was just confirming with a statement by the CS in charge of foreign affairs, Musalia Mudavadi. Point number 5, he says it is a DRC foreign minister who committed,
not
to
us,
assess and compensate Kenyan government for the damages on the embassy. Our demands were totally different, that the integrity of our mission there be protected. Yes, definitely it's a big discussion today, and it remains to be seen whether or not the talks spearheaded by the East Africa Community Chairperson William Ruto, bringing together all the parties involved in the DRC crisis, will actually materialize today. We're hoping that the heads of states involved will show up. So it is something that continues to be a major talking point. On the front page of the Daily Nation, the headline screams, DRC erupts. I want us to come back home and take a look at something totally different, because our politics is also hot. And away from matters diplomacy, we are discussing whether or not we have a viable opposition as we head towards 2027. One of our reporters here at T47 did an assessment of former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua's making as an opposition leader. Let's watch that story, Gachagua, the making of an opposition leader. Then we come back and do an assessment of the viability of Kenya's opposition.
In the wake of the bravado and chest thumping that followed his impeachment by President William Ruto's allies, it was clear that his political career was over. However, former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has turned the tables on his former boss, President William Ruto, and his rivals to emerge as a formidable opposition leader and a nightmare to President Ruto's re-election campaign ahead of the 2027 polls.
Kuna watu matapeli ambao walikuwa na kazi kubwa kubwa wakashindwa because of incompetence, kwa sababu ya ukabila, kwa sababu ya ufisadi, kwa sababu ya chuki, kwa sababu ya kukosa mwelekeo. Ati wanaenda pale wanatupatia lecture. Mnatupatia lecture kama nani? Bure kabisa.
Anaenda pale Western, anasema tumefukuza huyu Rigathi Gachagua, and he is corrupt. William Ruto, my friend, do you have the moral authority to talk about corruption?
Since his impeachment, Gachagua has boldly called out the president over his failings, among them unkept promises, over their hustler bottom-up economic promises, corruption and poor performance, while alleging the president is a conman who should not be trusted, a statement that has not sat well with the president and his allies.
Gachagua and the mountain have one purpose, to make Ruto a one-term president. Then they will be looking for that candidate who will seal it. And that person can be better than Raila Odinga. So that's the danger in Raila losing. So if I were Ruto, I would pull all the stuff. I will make sure Raila wins this thing.
In the populous Mount Kenya region, Gachagua has seemingly managed to overturn Ruto's support. To an extent, the president is yet to set foot in the region after his impeachment, with the ground hostile to the president's allies.
Hata umeanza kutupanga nani atakuwa mjumbe, nani atakuwa MCA, nani atakuwa governor, umeanza kutupanga na yeye mwenyewe hujajipanga.
Gachagua has also managed to reach out to opposition leaders Kalonzo Musyoka, Martha Karua, Eugene Wamalwa, and Dr. Fred Matiang'i's camp, with eyes fixed on denying Ruto support in Western, Lower Eastern, Kisii and the Mount Kenya region.
Once a new government is sworn in, that housing levy will have to be abolished so that we restore the dignity of the payslip.
Ruto is in danger. He said the moment we take over, we shall end this housing thing. Look, that's dangerous. So that's where we are. We are at a point when the issues are so clear, the problems are so clear, and the touching the people, exciting them is also very easy.
Apul Kamau, TV47.
So the discussions now are centered on whether or not we have a viable opposition. Does it have a bite? Is Gachagua the bite? Do we have enough weight on the opposition side if they were to be placed on a scale with William Ruto on one side and the conglomeration of all these other leaders who are calling themselves the opposition on the other? Bwana Kamanya, is it a valid debate? Because I'm seeing even on the Standard, on the front page, they're talking about Azimio, but they're saying death of opposition, a boon for Ruto.
In my opinion, this is not a valid conversation to have. And because from where I stand, the impeached and the former deputy president is not a leader of any opposition in the country. And I see him trying to make efforts to join the opposition. The opposition of this regime are the people of Kenya, who have termed this regime as illegitimate as of June last year.
Are you dismissing the other people? We have Kalonzo Musyoka, the DAP, Martha Karua, all that. Are you dismissing them, even away from Rigathi Gachagua?
Straight away, because one, the watermelon, the senior counsel, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, has remained very indifferent, has remained very ambivalent on the fence. By the mere fact that Azimio joined government, he criticizes the government, and yet he's a party leader. He's a senior person in the Azimio coalition. He has refused to walk, and then on the other foot, on the left foot, he's supporting the Gen Z and the revolution. And then he claims to have, to be the leader of the opposition who wants to challenge the government. So we have always asked the question, where is he? Is he in government? Is he in Azimio? And why is he not walking out as the Wiper party and do what he wants to do, whether it is to seek presidency or otherwise? Now, at least Martha Karua, she tendered her withdrawal from the Azimio coalition. Eugene is doing his best to build his party, and I must congratulate him for pulling all those people together, and this seems to be the umbrella that will be, hopefully, for them, grow to be one of the opposition parties. But by and large, Kenyans fully understand the political matrix that we are facing right now. We know that we have a regime that is really not addressing our public policy as we would want it to, from health and all the other issues that we've been talking about. We know that there is an oncoming election in 2027, just less than 3 years to go. And the preparations must happen. But what we cannot afford right now is to have an opposition defined by the government. We cannot have the president telling us who is going to be our opposition. He cannot appoint Gachagua and the likes to be the people who will be trying to vote him for or against. Kenyans are very clear. We need a change of guard. So I appreciate the efforts of the former deputy president. And we treat him as a jilted lover. He's still bitter and angry because the things he comes out and says about the government are not new things that are happening today. These are things that have been going on for 2 years whilst he was in office. And for those 2 years, he used to tell the same people of Mount Kenya, relax, our issues are being addressed, the president is doing well, the government is okay, nothing will go wrong so long as I'm here. He started off with Mitego. All those things have lapsed. So the question we are asking today, can we trust the former deputy president with power as Kenyans? Would we feel comfortable to have him propel and form the next government? I think the answer is no.
It is a viability of this formation that we see, the alternative formation away from William Ruto, and whether or not they actually hold water. Are they weighty enough? Yesterday on my panel, someone drew comparisons with elephants and chicken, that on one hand you have elephants just trying to fight chicken. Is that what we see? That this grouping is going nowhere?
I think the the debate on who is the opposition at this particular moment is a bit early, it's premature, because things are still forming. But I would like to remind Kenyans that the Mount Kenya region, sorry for me to use that term, and I hope nobody looks at me as tribal, voted for William Ruto to over 85% of the population, of the voters. And the reason, the main rationale behind it is that the people of Mount Kenya felt that Ruto, as the deputy president, had been mistreated by the former sitting head of state, Uhuru Kenyatta. It did not matter whether Uhuru came from central Kenya or not. But the Mount Kenya people, in their own views, they thought it's good for them, or for us, because I'm part of them, to do things right way. If Uhuru and Ruto were in the same camp from 2013 and 2017, they found it as a mischief for it to be like Uhuru was not supporting Ruto. So the fact that Ruto was not being supported and was being sort of betrayed, he got a very big sympathetic vote. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because the scenario is repeating itself. The people, the ordinary wananchi, Wanjikos as you put them, they think that, or feel that, are of the opinion that Rigathi Gachagua was so instrumental in mobilizing the Mount Kenya vote so that the Kenya Kwanza regime could ascend to the State House. So the fact that he's being removed, or he has been removed from the office, what the common mwananchi on the ground, who are the voters, by them a vote and yours are the same, votes are the same, feel that President William Ruto has mistreated Rigathi Gachagua. By mistreating Rigathi Gachagua, it is being interpreted as mistreating the community. And that is where Rigathi has positioned himself as the leader of the Mount Kenya community, and strategically he has achieved a lot, and as it is now, people are resonating with that. There is this discussion about what my brother is talking about here, and I live in the village myself, a discussion which is elitist. People like me and you can be able to do some concept explication on issues. But on the ground, it's either you are treating Gachagua fairly or unfairly. As at the moment, Gachagua is being mistreated, is being looked at a victim who is being mistreated and treated unfairly, not as a Jotun lover. That's the way I see on the ground. The other thing I would like to say is that in terms of this government, positions have been taken against or for the government, against or for the current leaders, and it's very difficult from where I sit as a person, it's a personal view, for a major move from that position come 2027. I mean, the government has to do a lot to revert the position in Mount Kenya and so forth. So what I can say is that the opposition in Kenya at the moment is the people, the voters. And it's not just Mount Kenya, it's across the board. The other thing is about the opposition is that Raila Odinga has historically been seen as a leader of the opposition. He has moved to government. That space is being taken by younger people. Look at people like Sifuna, look at people like Owino, Babu Owino and so forth. They are positioning themselves to take over that space which is being left by Ruto, by Raila. Even somebody like Orengo, governor of Siaya, who has been a bosom ally of Raila, is trying to exercise his independence. So what I can say for now is that we have an opposition to the current government, but the leadership of the opposition is still sharpening. It is still being formed.
It will take time.
It will take time. If these opposition leaders, call them Gachagua, call them Wamarwa, Martha Karua, and so forth, are able to unite and have a structured leadership within themselves and get one of them as a flag bearer, there will be a possibility of going to 202 scenario, whereby these yote yanaweza wezekana. As I conclude, I want to say that there's a funny scenario here. We had two major presidential candidates, 2022. That was President William Ruto and Raila Odinga. So both of them are in the same camp. We had two deputy presidential candidates, Martha Karua and Rigathi Gachagua. Now they are one camp. So the deputies are one camp and the presidential candidates are one camp. So that's an emerging scenario. And the question I'm asking is, were these people appointed for convenience, or did they ever see a philosophy or a position the people were supposed to assist?
Okay. Yeah. But we see the president taking a lot of time to respond to at least one of
yes, but let me answer that.
These figureheads.
I think the danger here is the way the president is taking time to respond to some issues. It's a strategy. And I think he wants Gachagua to exhaust himself.
Okay.
In terms of what he has to say. And I think the Gachagua should be careful that he does not exhaust himself and doesn't have any bullets for the final push.
But the way it's coming out, it's like of all these people in the opposition grouping, at least Gachagua provides the bite that probably was lacking in the larger grouping.
Well, first of all, the question as to who is the opposition leader or not, the people of Kenya are actually the leaders of opposition for themselves. The people of Kenya abrogated back the power to themselves, and they've actually been doing active oversight where leaders failed. The leaders are simply catching up. If you see what the Gachagua team is trying to do, they are catching up. They are following up where the people already went. Otherwise, the people of Kenya already decided in and of themselves to actually do the oppositionist politics, and they are doing it so well. You need to be actually on social media and see how they do it. They are forcing politicians to catch up with them. I'll give you a quick example. You know, you would be surprised that the CS Muturi, for example, knew too well how the abductions were happening. But he kept quiet. When people had been in the streets, they had done everything. He came out late until he had a personal push. That's when he came to speak of what he knew. Remember that even the second deputy president, spoke about a 21st floor and the people in the team that is doing that. He still owes Kenyans an explanation as to what that building is and who those people are. It's unfair for him to actually give us piecemeal information when everybody is worried about it and they're talking about it. So you realize that the political class is catching up with Kenyans. Otherwise, Kenyans have already bolted and they've left. That particular bit is very, very important. So as to what we saw the other day, I think, first of all, it was a political housewarming. DAP had its new house, and it called the political boys to come and just have a housewarming party. But that's why I don't think that them meeting there and donning blue is anything very significant. What for me is of significance is what the former deputy president said there. Otherwise, the gesture in itself is nothing. We've seen that, at least I'm old enough to have seen enough of similar groupings. So it's the politicians who are trying to catch up with the people. The people have already gone. They are doing oversight on themselves. We see them, but they've actually even made parliament look like it's ineffective completely. Because you have got a policy statement coming in parliament. The people do a synthesis of that, put it out there. Literally everybody knows about it. So when a politician shows up in the funeral over the weekend, people already have got an idea of where that policy is going. And if he tries to go any other different direction, he's told, no, that's not where to go. So politicians are catching up with Kenyans. It's not that they're taking Kenyans anywhere. Whatever regard they did, of course, during the DAP housewarming, was simply respond to what had been said of him in Western Kenya. It's the people in Western Kenya who decided to start the honest nest because he was responding. He wasn't here the instigator. He actually only was responding to what had been said of him while in Western. But you also have to see the significance of that. The Luo and Luya, for example, if you're going to go ethnic in looking at numbers, are 25% of Kenya's population. If you brought in the Kisis, you have got 31% of the population. So give or take, if you were to work with that, then you have got a number that can replace the entire of Mount Kenya when it comes to votes, because the whole of Mount Kenya, I'm talking about East and West, is about 24.7%. So we can give it 25% of the population. And therefore, with a good GOtv, that is get out the vote, you can actually cancel out with that. So definitely, there was a response on two fronts, that while he was there, the people of Western were told, okay, you guys can actually stand in. And then while at it, they took pop shots at the former deputy president. So while he was here, he responded to that. And of course, he did it in his... I don't think anybody's exhausting him, but they're making him relevant.
If he was so inconsequential, would they have wasted time talking about the gentleman in Western Kenya? That's a question, because we're talking not just about general opposition in terms of oversight in the government. It's an alternative to what we have right now. Do we have a viable alternative?
There are a lot of alternatives actually out there. The problem is that we are being conditioned as a people to only think about the current people in government and these friends of theirs who are out here. But literally, a country of 60 million people, you can't tell me that the talent and the gift of leadership. I've already told you that Kenyans of themselves actually demonstrate.
Be honest, it's only 2.5 years to election day. Are you saying that someone viably, a viable presidential candidate will emerge from nowhere?
Can I respond to that quickly just before he comes in? Number one, you know, if we were honest and talk about the ground, you will realize that Kenyans are actually very disillusioned with the political class today. Not just people in government. They are disillusioned even with the people on this other side. The idea that there's this exceptionalist thinking in Kenya that we are always special and we are very different. That when Madagascar elects a DJ, that cannot happen in Kenya. That's what we are thinking. That when the second oldest country on earth like Ukraine elects a stand-up comedian, that cannot happen in Kenya. You know, at the rate at which the politicians are messing up, Kenyans can easily vote even Crazy Kena as president. As in they can vote anyone else.
One vote there for Crazy Kena. But
no, I'm just saying that at the rate at which the politicians are actually losing favor, Kenyans a lot of times vote, they don't vote for somebody. They vote against somebody. And you can actually see that Kenyans already have got an idea of whom not to vote for.
Okay.
Well, the beauty of our nation is that this is a new dawn for Kenya. And 2027 is going to be very traumatic to some people.
Still concerned it's 2.5 years.
Yes, yes. I mean, like Maliba had said, some characters have been voted in as president in some countries. That was never expected to happen. Now, another case in point is just a recently concluded election in the US. They changed their presidential candidate during the home stretch. Yeah. So things are bound to happen. This is too early, this is too soon. But what we are seeing is exactly what my colleagues are saying, that the politicians are under attack. Remember, these are all cousins. That's why you see there's an overlap. Do we belong to this coalition? Are we in government? Are we in opposition? And this also happened towards the 2022 election. And you remember the president himself, I think he was in the US, saying that we have a mongrel of a government where we don't know whether the government is in opposition or the opposition is in the government. It is the same exact thing that is happening now. The only difference is, as Kenyans, now we are politically woke. We know that we don't need to start our campaign now and saying, Fred, you're going to be our president. We first need to understand what we want. We are not now looking at just the people. We must first have a campaign question. What do we want this country to look like? And then we'll look back and say, who can fill in the gaps? Then that is where Mheshimiwa will come in, Maliba will come in, Fred will come in, and finally we will say, based on the needs that we want, based on the philosophy that we are running today, this is the right person to have as a president. Of course, coalitions are going to form. And I will want to see a situation whereby in 2027 we have at least 6 presidential candidates, strong candidates, people who can drive a conversation, a narrative for this country to transform, people who will have an agenda, political parties who will do very good grassroots mobilization, and will have a political discourse, peaceful, of course, and hopefully, and then finally agree that this is the right person for the job. And most importantly, accept and respect the outcome. Okay. Because we have been pitted against always 2 candidates. And the one constant candidate has been the one who holds the reservation for losing, hopefully also for the AUC, the Right Honorable Odinga. And every other time we've had an election, from 2007, 2012, 2017, 2022, and we are saying it will not happen in 2027, there has been, simply put, a disagreement on who won the election. We do not want that to happen.
But 2.5 years is still my concern. You feel it's a lot of time, that things could actually change significantly so that we can have an opposition that is able to excite the masses? This one has been described even as boring.
I think 2.5 years is not a long time in politics, in Kenya in particular, because it's exactly 2.5 years from now up to August 2027. In Kenya, traditionally, politics start a year before the elections, at least a year. So by next year, March, political status of this country will be at high pitch. So we are talking about 1.5 years, 1.25 years remaining before we enter the home stretch. Because to me, the home stretch will start from March, April next year. Point number 2 is that I agree with the Wakili that the politicians are trying to align to the mwananchi. That is completely true. That's what they say, tunasikiza ground. They listen to the ground, and because of their interest, call it opportunism, they go to where the ground is. And when they are leaders in the ground, they will be there, come next year, come the year after, and they see their way into office. The other point is, Wakili is saying that we are 60 million. I agree we have 60 million people who are all equally, if you have 18.
You've given Bwana Maliba a new title, Wakili. I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay. sorry. Wakili.
He's a public policy analyst.
Oh, public policy analyst. Sorry, I misrepresented you. But I'm saying this. The election is about who is on the ballot. It's not about who is competent, but outside the ballot. Mm-hmm. You look at the 2022 general elections, and I use Uber a lot. Anytime I use Uber, I ask the young man, did you vote in 2022? 90% are telling me no. Then I ask them why. They said they normally say it's because we didn't see a choice between Ruto and Raila. To them, those two guys were just the same. Mm-hmm. So 2022, in the way I see, the people or the person who is going to lead the opposition is among the people who have already offered themselves for leadership in whichever political party. Could be Kalonzo, could be Wamalwa, could be Natembea, could be Gachagua, or anybody else. But somebody who does not put himself as a candidate cannot be considered. Yes. And that's a problem we have in this country. We keep on saying that we have got a bad crop of politicians, which could be true. But this is because the competent people who have gone to school,
they don't offer themselves.
They don't offer themselves. They're in the comfort zone.
We have a few names that have come into the fray. I've joined the fray, names like Fred Matiang'i, George Natembea, and now even Rigathi Gachagua, who previously people did not classify him as probably a best alternative against this government. Is that enough to excite the debate or the discussion around Kenya's opposition?
First of all, I think the movement by politicians is exclusive of the movement that happened last year. Young people came to the ground, the Gen Zs, the millennials, the fighting last year. And by the way, it's important that we contextualize this. That if you look at the civic space last year, it was too much about issues. People walked away from politics of identity. By identity here, I mean that even as we spoke here, you had people talk about Western. I mentioned Western. He spoke about Central. For the longest time, our politics have been politics of identity. We as the Muslim community, we as Christians, we as the people from Northeastern, it's about an identity. We as people from this region, so it's about regionalism, whatever cultural, religious aspirations people have, or other inclination they do have, ethnicity and stuff. If you look at the civic space last year, it made politicians who actually have thrived around the politics of identity lose foothold completely. And then what happened is that then politicians congregated on one side and the people on the other side. So the movement by the people is still on. That has not been impeached by what you see politicians doing here. What you call, let me say, quote unquote, the Gen Z movement is exclusive of this. Mm-hmm. Because of all the things they asked for, other than light issues here and there, a majority of those things, they were not even included in government. They were, in any case, they were excluded. So what you see here are politicians trying to come up with the best way of courting the movement we saw last year. So I would still insist that there's always a first time. I know he insists that normally, and by the way, that is a research that had been done, that Kenyans decide on the president 2 years before an election. Mm-hmm. That when polled, the person somebody said they will vote for 2 years to an election is always the person, to a large extent, is the person they still vote for when the elections come. There's very little variation. But there is always an exception to every rule. And looking at how this country has actually worked through the last 2 years, you can actually realize, like for example, who believed that anyone will actually mobilize as many people as we saw in the streets without having a political figurehead? Ordinarily, that was a preserve for Raila Odinga. The person who would bring masses to the streets was Raila Odinga. Do you know who brought the people to the streets of Nairobi last year? You can't pinpoint. You do not know. So that, they took away the carpet from under Raila's feet. So we can therefore not stick. Let's stop conditioning the masses to think in a certain way. And that is, by the way, what the politicians are doing. That you see, and we in the media also helping them do that. But okay, now we already are mentioning names and conditioning them to start thinking about that. And that is why I say that is exceptionalism. If it's
these ones have offered themselves. Yes. We can only talk about the reality.
No, that's where we are, but we are insisting that if somebody has not shown up this year, then they might not be of consequence when it comes to 2027, and that is actually what I'm disabusing. That if you look at last year, you can therefore not argue that it has to go a certain way. And for me, I think we are losing the big point, especially for the DAP housewarming. What the former DP said there is something that we should be focusing on. Number one, Rigathi Gachagua impeached the bottom-up economic plan that the government is running. He completely destroyed it. He impeached it because he destroyed the foundations and the anchors of that plan. Realistically, government needs to come out, UD and both, government needs to actually come out and respond to that. Because if you look at the flagship projects, he dismissed them. Said if it's about affordable housing, he said it's not about the houses or the jobs. He said it's about supplying material to the manufacturers doing that. That is impeaching a plan. It's a serious allegation. And by the way, whether Rigathi Gachagua is healing or not, whether he is a jilted lover or not, whether he is hurting or not, the allegations he made are, for me, the most damning revelations. And if Parliament really needs to redeem itself, they should actually ask him to actually come up and shed a light. Because apart from impeaching the plan, he spoke about, look at all the flagship projects, SHA, or rather the affordable housing, health, literally everything. He reigned on the main pillars that hold that plan and said those were just commercial interests for other people. Number two, he raised a very serious issue of state capture, that the president is a captive of commercial interests of some two individuals that he mentioned. So, and he made it look like exactly what the Guptas were doing in South Africa. That is a serious allegation. So while we are here arguing about opposition and whatever, I think the content of his speech, because by the way, he has got his Article 38 rights of political association and being part and parcel of anyone.
We've had those conversations before, but it depended on who was saying it. And is it the fact that he is saying it and he was a former deputy?
And you know why that is important? When the alligator comes out of water one morning and tells you the crocodile is dead, Fred, you don't live in water. You cannot doubt the alligator. So those allegations are damning.
The other analogy I want to add to, today Maliba is doing the Lord's work.
He's injecting.
When the crocodile comes out and tells you the hippopotamus is sick, comes out of the water, you don't doubt that. You don't go into the water to confirm. It is not upon us as Kenyans to question whether what Rigathi Gachagua is saying is true about the government, about state capture, about corruption, about organized, budgeted corruption. We do not have to question that because we know that the services that we are receiving today are well undercut. So the evidence is right there. It is in the pudding. Now, of significance for us as Kenyans, and I want to agree that we do not want to condition ourselves to that the political class are the people who hold the solution to our country. No, they are not. We, the people, hold the power. We, the people, know what we need. We, the people, shall elect a president in 2027. And it shall not be any of these characters you're seeing, for two particular reasons. One, if we have given you an opportunity to serve this country and you have failed, please forget about being elected and forming the next government. One of those people is our sitting president. The regime and what they are offering Kenyans is no longer acceptable, period, simply put. The second person is a former and impeached deputy president. You were in office, you have been impeached. Whether we get to election, whether his impeachment still stands, that will disqualify him into running for any opposition. And we cannot trust him to form a government. Because today, he's telling us that the president has all these vibarakas, his lieutenants. And he's the one who is calling the shot from the county of governors to the Senate, to the members of parliament, to the parliament, and to the cabinet secretary, to the cabinet. We cannot trust him not to do the same. We cannot trust the Rigathi Gachagua to help us form a government that will transform the economic crisis that we are in as a country. Thirdly, the Kalonzo Musyoka we're just talking about, he's been so ambivalent. So Kenyans, we are very woke. We know that these people, they are under threat by the Gen Z revolution. The revolution lives on. And remember, the revolution is about what? A call for good governance. None of these characters can liberate the country from the shackles of economic deprivation that we're experiencing today. So we shall not allow them to divert the conversation to political political ideals, to political careers that they want to sustain at the expense of Kenyans. It is too soon, but I know we shall have a president. In my opinion, it will not be any of these, including the sitting president.
I think we are talking from the same script, but what I would like first for giving what has been presented, I want to reiterate that if you want to be president, if you want to be holder of any office, you must offer yourself for elective politics, period. You cannot be shouting from the fridges and expect that you'll be president. We have so many competent Kenyans who can be president, including you, who can be president, including him and everybody who was here. But the thing is, you must offer yourself. So what I'm saying, the Gen Z movement lives on. The Gen Z movement has impeached this government in June 25 last year. But for us to see the leaders of that Gen Z movement being co-opted in the same regime we are fighting is a bit frustrating. So what I'm saying is that Gen Zs should be able to have a leadership which can sustain the pressure of the day and push the movement forward until the ballot. Otherwise, if they have got a price that they can be bought today and tomorrow and they go, then there will be no leader. And that's what I'm saying. What you should now be encouraging people is, if you feel that you can lead this country come 2027, please offer yourself for consideration. If you don't offer yourself for consideration, you'll not be elected. And let not ourselves...
No magic will happen.
No magic will happen.
You won't just be
exactly.
From the street.
And let's not cheat ourselves that you have got so many people who can be presidents, and they can be president, and they are not offering themselves. Finally, elections in Kenya are also expensive. You can't just wake up in the one morning and say, I want to be president tomorrow. There's a financial aspect to that which must be put into consideration. So I want to say that, as I conclude this, my contribution to this item, is that the government of the day has lost the goodwill which it had in 2022. Because getting a mandate to govern is a big goodwill. Getting 85% from Mount Kenya is a major goodwill which has been wasted. And right now, if I do an assessment for Mount Kenya, I come from there myself, and I don't think this government can score more than 5-10% of the, maybe 5%. They'll be doing too well. And so, what has made this situation happen? One of them is Gachagua, who is actually injecting, trying to expose the government who was part of it. And the other one is the president's lieutenants. Some of the president people, anytime they speak, he loses like 100,000 votes. They are so annoying to communities that they show total disregard of what is happening, the pain which the communities are going through. When they say SHA is working, either you like it or not, sure, that does not go on well. No. So this government is also suffering from self-inflicted injury, which is a big component of its poor performance rating today. As PLO said, Lumumba, sometimes you must be willing to listen to your enemies, because your enemies will tell you what your friends cannot tell you. Right now, I don't think we have any enemies, but your political people, divergent views. This government is just living in a straitjacket. Okay. It is either you or you and nobody else. Thank you.
You still have hope that someone will emerge from the streets and mount a proper presidential challenge?
First of all, I do not believe that the presidential race is already cast in stone. I don't believe in that. We've not even come up with IBC. The elections are in 2027. People even die. So you can actually say that we are not going to have other people. The US, the other day, they changed already during the election. So I do not want us to sell to Kenyans this notion that the presidential election is already cast in stone. And therefore, if you've not declared, Mheshimiwa here is trying to encourage people to come out early so that then they take a shot at them. But having said that, I am also one of those people who believe that I don't think that the door is completely shut on President William Ruto. I still have the thinking that for this year, the president can actually course correct. it is his third year, he can actually course correct, and simply by doing 3 things. Number one, he must review the bottom-up economic plan. He must review it because we are no longer implementing it. He needs to give us a new plan, and there's nothing wrong with changing. Plans are supposed to be changed. Number two, he needs to change how he communicates. His communication is totally broken down. He has to change. That is the second issue. Number three, he must find a new set of advisors, people he can listen to. Because as it is today, the president looks like he advises his advisors. If he does those 3 things, the president has a hope. But the one thing I am sure of, 100%, is that if President William Ruto can survive the onslaught that he has, none of his lieutenants will actually make it. Because those are the people who simply are making it so difficult for him. Even in Rift Valley, a lot of the people, if you go to the ground, you will realize the people are so angry with the people who are working with the president. They feel like they're not giving him the right counsel. They feel like wanamchomea. So if the president survives, the one thing I know is that he will arrive a wounded man and without his soldiers. He will have a whole new, Kenyans will give him new people to go with. But then there's something Mheshimiwa has said here, and we must disabuse that. That our campaigns, our politics is expensive and everything is. Our politics is expensive, and that is why it's been problematic. Kenyans have demonstrated that they can crowd fund. They actually have demonstrated that they can volunteer to actually ensure that a political cause is working out. That scaremongering of people is what actually scares away competent people from coming into politics. And that Kenyans must be told that if you choose money over competence, you end up with the problems we have today.
Correct.
You end up being forced to march to parliament and thereafter being abducted for that. As in, we do not, Kenyans, if Kenyans had to choose right, they did not have to march to parliament. They would actually have elected people who listen to them. They had a glut of those individuals. So you don't have to make mistakes and then shed blood to correct that. You can correct that during elections. And let's not make it look like it's expensive and difficult. Okay. Finally, or finalies, is this.
We only have, I wanted to give you each a minute to a final comment. You can, and I wanted you really to talk about something else, the IEBC that we mentioned. And now finally we have a selection.
Yes.
And in the next 90 days, we're going to have, hopefully,
a commission.
Without barring any legal challenges. But there are so many things to do, including the boundaries delimitation and review, preparations for the general election, the by-elections that are still pending, and registration of voters. 30 months to 2027, minus 3 months, 27 months, is that enough time for all this?
Well, firstly, because there is finals, but firstly, there is
about a minute.
Yes, there is a paradigm shift, and there is new thinking on how we are going to vote in 2027. This is just the beginning of it, and I'm sure we are open to a lot of intricacies that are going to happen. I agree, it is not cast in stone yet. This is just the beginning. Secondly, IEBC, finally, we can catch a breath and at least grasp some hope that we are going to have the formation of IEBC, hopefully fully functional and able to execute the mandate. Because remember, as you rightly say, there is a boundary review. There is 12 areas that are not represented. I think we have 3 constituencies and 9 wards across the country. There is a continuous voter registration. I'm hoping we are not going to have any litigations around the panel that is going. I want to sometimes have to seed ground. We may not be fully satisfied with the composition of the panelists, but I am okay with it operating. I hope they're just able to execute the mandate, and soon enough we have a commission that will now roll out the plan towards preparation for 2027. If we can get this right, yes, we are stretched and pressed for time, but if we can get it right, I think it's going to save us a lot of pressure and emotional anguish come 2027. So let's give them time and support it fully. It's a process that all Kenyans want to see go smoothly.
Parting shot.
Yes, before finally, I would like to say that I want to, first of all, make clarification by what I meant elections are expensive. I do not mean that the best way to get the best candidate is by using a lot of money. I think the best way for us to get the competent leadership is where we follow issues and you don't follow money. Because we give 200 shillings, 500 shillings, then regret for 5 years. But why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I'm practical. I've been on the ground. I've been a candidate lot man in 2022. And people are telling me, Mheshimiwa, you have a lot of good points, good ideas. You have worked for us before. But we are sorry we can't vote for you. Because ujachoma jeshi. That's the way it is. So I'm not trying to say that's what I believe in. But I want to see that is the practical things on the ground. So how do I help Kenyans who want to emerge? The way I can help them so I can get good presidential candidates is on this platform, I tell them my experience on the ground, so they can tell you I can tell them how to prepare themselves. I don't want to be theoretical on this platform and say that you can be a professor, you can be and so then you be elected. No, it can't happen. You have got many people with good ideas. Professor Wangari Maathai won a Nobel Prize. He got international recognition, but you're still voting out in Nyeri as an MP because people at the ground level look at different set of attributes from what is looked at higher levels. So the people who are going to come out, my brother is talking, I believe they are there. Let them come up, let them be prepared with 3 things: ideology, resources, and a network.
Money is important.
Money is important.
Okay.
And I'm going to stick by that because Wajiko knows that.
We only have a minute.
Now,
yes.
And I also want to say about IBC.
Yes, very briefly.
IBC, I want to concur with my brother said, but there's a danger if the IBC is not formed today because you're going to lose there are some protected constituencies which are based on boundary review after every 10 years. So it's important for us to give and take and ensure that you have got a competent IBC and objective, which is not worked by the executive. Because the executive can also ensure that they force an IBC, which is going to be singing their tunes, which can spell danger for 2027. Thank you.
Thank you. 60 seconds only.
I think it's a very good thing that we now finally have got the selection panel for IBC. It's something that we've been waiting for. We've denied a lot of representation to, or rather, the right for representation for so many people. Constituencies that members of parliament died, others were removed by court. We've got same with wards. It's very, very important that we give them a right for representation. Also, I'm not going to speak about having an objective IBC, a good one and everything else. Looking at how woke Kenyans have begun, even if UDA organizes the next election, if UDA does well, they will win the election. But even if UDA were to organize the next election and they are the IBC, if they don't do the right thing, they will still lose even if they organize the election. So all we need is an IBC because the masses are now woke. It doesn't matter whoever will actually oversee this election. And that then speaks to the people who will actually come through as commissioners, that you need to look at the job you're going to take up. IBC for the longest time has actually been a graveyard of careers where very brilliant people come from elsewhere and then they die here. I think that if they look at how the country looks like, I'm 100% sure that in 2022, for example, a sitting government lost to the opposition. Now, seeing what has happened last year and how the country continuously is evolving and the demographics of voters has actually changed, the people who come in as commissioners will have no option but to do the right thing. That's why that's why I'm saying even if it were UDA that were to organize the next election, if they do the right thing, they will be elected. But they can actually organize the election and still lose it if they don't do the right thing, because you can actually see what Kenyans think about how to move around this.
Thank you so much, Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst, Dr. Njogu Barua, former MP Geshogo constituency, and Josephat Kamanya, political analyst, panelists this morning on State of the Nation. Thank you so much for your very well-considered opinions on the issues we've discussed, from regional diplomacy to local politics as well. After the break, another discussion on matters relationships. Do stand by for that. A huge panel will be right here in studio. My name is Fred Indemuli. Good morning.